The mud of Zappolino is still warm with blood as the soldiers of Modena push their way through the city gates. They are not carrying chests of gold or captured banners of silk. Instead, a group of sweating men hauls a battered wooden bucket through the crowd. Church bells across Modena scream in a wild metal rhythm, drowning out the cheers of thousands. The soldiers are covered in the iron-scented filth of battle, their leather armor stained dark by the autumn rain. They laugh as they lift the bucket high, a simple vessel of oak and iron hoops that has cost 2,000 lives in a single afternoon. Behind them, the horizon is thick with the black smoke of burning farms, marking the path of their retreat. 3 bored soldiers slip through the darkness of a Bolognese alleyway, only months before the slaughter begins. The air in Bologna is thick with the smell of roasting meat and damp stone. These men are not assassins or high-ranking spies. They are common infantrymen looking for a way to spit in the face of their rivals. They reach a public well in the center of the city where the water reflects the pale moonlight. With a quick jerk, they slice the rope and hoist the bucket. It is a heavy, waterlogged thing that smells of wet wood and deep earth. They vanish into the shadows, clutching the stolen prize like a holy relic. This one act of petty theft is designed to prove that Bologna is powerless. To understand why a bucket triggers a massacre, one must look at the fractured spine of 14th century Italy. The entire peninsula is a jagged mosaic of city-states caught in a spiritual and political civil war. On one side are the Guelphs, who bow to the absolute authority of the Pope in Rome. On the other stand the Ghibellines, who pledge their steel to the Holy Roman Emperor. Bologna is a jewel of the papal crown, wealthy and arrogant with its rising towers and famous university. Modena is a jagged Ghibelline fortress, stubborn and fiercely loyal to the distant emperor. These 2 cities have hated each other for 200 years, and the stolen bucket is simply the spark that hits a mountain of dry tinder. The elders of Bologna gather in the candlelit halls of the city palace, their faces red with fury. The news of the stolen bucket spreads through the marketplaces like a physical sickness. To the proud citizens of Bologna, this is not just a missing tool. It is a public castration of their honor. They see the theft as a direct insult to the Pope himself. The city council demands the immediate return of the bucket, but Modena responds with mocking laughter. This refusal forces the hand of the Bolognese generals. They begin to liquidate the city's massive wealth to build an army that can wipe Modena off the map. Gold coins flow into the hands of mercenaries, and the peace of the region finally collapses. Inside the towering stone walls of Modena, the stolen bucket is given a place of honor. It does not go to a kitchen or a stable, but is placed inside the main cathedral for all to see. The soldiers who took it are treated like conquering heroes of legend. They drink deep of dark wine in the taverns, boasting of how they walked into the heart of Bologna and took what they pleased. The smell of roasted pork and wood smoke fills the air as the city prepares for the coming storm. They know a massive force is gathering against them, but the bucket has become a symbol of their independence. To return it would be to admit they are slaves to the Roman papal state. The sound of hammers hitting white-hot iron echoes through the streets of Bologna for 24 hours a day. Blacksmiths work until their hands are blistered and raw, forging 30,000 spearheads and thousands of heavy iron arrowheads. The air in the industrial quarters is thick with the choking smell of coal smoke and the metallic tang of sharpened steel. Every able-bodied man is pulled from his shop or his farm to train in the muddy fields outside the walls. The city is a machine of war now, fueled by the desire for revenge. They are spending more gold on this one campaign than they have earned in a decade of trade. Pride is a debt that must be paid in blood and iron. A young foot soldier named Marco stands in the rain, his fingers fumbling with the buckles of his stiff leather gambeson. He is 20 years old and has never seen a man die by the sword. The mail shirt he wears is heavy and cold, smelling of stale grease and old rust. He looks at the thousands of men around him, a sea of steel helmets and colorful banners flapping in the damp wind. Marco does not care about the Pope or the Emperor. And he certainly does not care about a wooden bucket from a well. He only knows that he is cold, hungry, and terrified of the giant Modernese knights. Yet, the momentum of 30,000 men pushes him forward toward the dark mountain passes. The Bolognese army moves like a massive glittering snake across the landscape of the Emilia-Romagna region. It is a force of 30,000 infantry and 2,000 heavily armored cavalry. From a distance, the army is a beautiful display of silk banners and polished shields reflecting the pale autumn sun. But on the ground, it is a chaotic mess of tramping boots and the constant braying of pack mules. The sheer scale of the host is meant to terrify Modena into surrendering without a single drop of blood being spilled. They march toward the fortress of Zappolino, a strategic gateway that stands between them and their goal. The earth itself seems to groan under the weight of so many marching men. The watchmen on the towers of Modena see the dust clouds on the horizon and feel a cold knot of dread. They have managed to gather only 7,000 men to defend their homes. It is a pathetic force compared to the tidal wave of steel coming from the south. However, the Modenese are fighting for their very existence. They know that if the city falls, the Guelphs will show no mercy to the supporters of the emperor. The streets of Modena are silent now. The laughter of the previous weeks replaced by the sound of priests praying in the darkened churches. Every man sharpens his knife and checks his shield, knowing that they must hold the narrow ground or die in the mud. Night falls over the valley of Zappolino, and the air becomes deathly still. Thousands of campfires dot the hillsides, looking like a carpet of fallen stars. Inside the silk tents of the Bolognese commanders, candles flicker as men argue over maps of the surrounding terrain. The smell of damp grass and wood smoke hangs heavy in the air. Outside, the soldiers sit in groups, passing around skins of sour wine to dull their nerves. They can hear the distant sound of the Modenese sharpening their blades on whetstones, a rhythmic scraping that cuts through the dark. A thick mist begins to roll off the mountains, swallowing the valley in a gray, silent shroud that hides the faces of the soon-to-be dead. The generals of Bologna make a fatal error in their arrogance as they position their massive force. They believe that their overwhelming numbers will be enough to crush the Modenese in a single charge. They choose a wide, muddy field near the fortress, unaware that the ground is soft enough to trap their heavy cavalry. The Modenese, led by experienced commanders who have fought in the emperor's wars, take the high ground and use the terrain to funnel the enemy. They arrange their 7,000 men in tight, disciplined blocks, creating a wall of spears that looks unbreakable. The sun begins to rise, cutting through the morning mist and revealing the two armies frozen in a moment of terrifying, absolute silence before the first scream. The silence is broken by the roar of 30,000 throats as the Bolognese infantry begins its slow advance. The sound of thousands of boots hitting the wet earth is like the heartbeat of a dying giant. Marco, the young soldier, finds himself pushed into the front rank, his shield trembling in his hands. He can see the faces of the Modenese now, their eyes narrowed behind the slits of their iron helmets. The first wave of arrows whistles through the air, looking like a flight of dark birds before they slam into wood and flesh. Men begin to fall, their cries lost in the thunder of the charge. The two front lines collide with a sound like a ship hitting a rock, a chaos of wood splintering. The air is suddenly filled with the iron taste of blood and the suffocating smell of unwashed bodies and horse sweat. Marco is swept into a whirlpool of violence where there is no room to move his arms. He feels a spear tip slide across his leather armor, leaving a jagged tear. The ground beneath his feet is becoming a slick, red sludge as men are trampled under the weight of the press. He hears the sound of a mace hitting a helmet, a wet crunch that he will never forget. There is no strategy here, only the desperate struggle to keep standing while men scream in his ears. The Modenese shield wall holds firm, their long spears stabbing into the gaps of the Bolognese formation with mechanical precision. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, the Bolognese numbers start to work against them. They are too crowded to retreat and too disorganized to move forward. This is the moment the Modenese have been waiting for. Their small force of cavalry, hidden behind a low ridge, suddenly erupts onto the field. They do not hit the front. They slam into the exposed flank of the Bolognese host. The impact is catastrophic. The horses, massive and armored in steel, cut through the unarmored infantry like a hot blade through wax. The scream of "The bucket!" rises from the Modenese ranks, a mocking war cry that shatters the remaining courage of the Guelphs. The massive army begins to buckle and fracture. Panic is a physical thing that moves through the Bolognese ranks faster than any weapon. The men in the back see the cavalry break through and turn to run, leaving their comrades in the front to be slaughtered. Marco throws down his shield and runs, his lungs burning in the cold evening air. The Modenese do not stop at the edge of the field. They pursue the fleeing soldiers through the darkening woods, their swords rising and falling with rhythmic cruelty. The retreat becomes a massacre, as thousands of men are cut down from behind. The road back to Bologna is soon lined with the discarded equipment of a broken army: helmets, shields, and banners lying abandoned in the mud and the blood-stained grass. The Modenese soldiers are no longer just defending their territory. They have become a vengeful tide. They chase the survivors for miles, pushing them all the way to the very walls of Bologna. The citizens watching from the high towers see their once mighty army returning as a shattered, bleeding mob. The Modenese stop just outside the range of the city's archers, their horses heaving and their blades dripping red. They have achieved the impossible, defeating a force 4 times their size in a single afternoon. The smell of victory is sweet, mixed with the smoke of the campfires they build right in front of the enemy's gates. They have come to finish the humiliation they started with a simple bucket. Instead of launching a suicide assault on the walls of Bologna, the Modenese decide to play a game. Under the moonlight, in full view of the terrified city, they hold a mock tournament and athletic games. They laugh and cheer, celebrating their victory, while the Bolognese elders watch in silent shame. To twist the knife even deeper, the Modenese find a second well just outside the city walls. They steal a second wooden bucket and parade it around like a royal crown. This act of petty spite is designed to show that they can take whatever they want from the Guelphs. After the games are finished, they begin the long march back to Modena, leaving the city of Bologna to rot in its own embarrassment. 2,000 men lie dead in the fields and forests around Zappolino, their bodies already stiffening in the night frost. A micro-look reveals a father and son lying together in a ditch, their hands still clutching their broken spears. These men did not die for a religion or a country. They died for the ego of city elders who could not handle a joke. The scavengers, crows and wolves, move in as the sounds of battle fade into the distance. The silver coins that the soldiers carried in their pouches are now buried in the mud, useless to the dead. The weight of this loss will be felt in every household in Bologna for a generation, leaving behind thousands of widows and orphans. The aftermath of the battle is a long, grueling process of political negotiation. The Pope is humiliated by the defeat of his supporters, and the Holy Roman Emperor gains a massive boost in influence over northern Italy. Embassies move between the two cities for months, arguing over border territories and the payment of ransoms for captured nobles. The one thing that the Bolognese demand in every single meeting is the return of the original wooden bucket. They offer gold and land, but the Modenese refuse every single deal. The bucket has become more valuable than any treasure because it represents the moment the small defeated the great. The peace is eventually signed, but the resentment between the neighbors only grows deeper. The bucket is moved from the cathedral to the Torre della Ghirlandina, the tallest tower in Modena. It is placed behind iron bars and protected like a king's ransom. It is no longer a tool for pulling water from the earth. It has become a holy relic of Ghibelline defiance. Over the centuries, the wood begins to dry and crack, and the iron hoops become covered in a thin layer of orange rust. Yet, it remains the most important object in the city. Generations of children are brought to the tower to hear the story of how their ancestors fought and died for this simple piece of oak. It serves as a permanent reminder that even the most powerful empire can be brought down by pride. The War of 1325 poisoned the relationship between Modena and Bologna for over 700 years. Even today, there is a playful but sharp rivalry between the citizens of the two cities. The story of the bucket is taught in schools and celebrated in local festivals, a narrative of survival against impossible odds. The cultural memory of the theft is a jagged piece of glass that has never been smoothed over by time. While modern Italy is a unified nation, these ancient city-state identities still simmer beneath the surface. The bucket is not just a historical fact, it is a living part of the local soul, a reminder that an insult can last much longer than a human life. Looking back at the war through the lens of history, the sheer absurdity of the conflict is staggering. Two city-states nearly bankrupted themselves and sacrificed thousands of their young men over a wooden container that cost less than a few copper coins. This is a classic case study in the human ego and the sunk cost fallacy, where leaders continue to pour resources into a disaster simply because they have already invested so much. The pride of the city elders was a fire that consumed the lives of people like Marco, who had no stake in the political game. The bucket is a testament to how easily humans can be manipulated into violence by symbols that have no inherent value. If you walk into the town hall of Modena today, you can still see the bucket. It hangs from the ceiling by a heavy chain, a dark and weathered object that looks completely ordinary. It is small, unassuming, and fragile. To a stranger, it is just a piece of old trash, but to those who know the history, it is a heavy thing, weighted with the lives of 2,000 soldiers. The wood is grayed by age, and the iron is pitted, but it has survived longer than the empires that fought over it. It sits in the silence of the museum, a quiet witness to the madness of the past. The bucket is the only winner in the War of 1325. The War of the Bucket illustrates a recurring theme in global history. Small, seemingly insignificant events can ignite massive pre-existing tensions. The bucket was not the cause of the war, it was the excuse. The underlying pressures of the Guelph and Ghibellines conflict had been building for decades, like tectonic plates grinding against one another. The theft simply provided the moral justification for a fight that both sides had been wanting for a long time. This pattern repeats in almost every major conflict, from the assassination of archdukes to the disputed borders of modern states. We are a species that looks for a reason to fight, and even a wooden bucket will serve the purpose if the pride is high enough. In the end, the names of the generals and the politicians who led the march to Zappolino have mostly faded from the collective human memory. Marco and the thousands of other young men who bled out in the mud are forgotten, their graves unmarked, and their stories lost to the wind. Only the bucket remains, sitting in its tower, a silent and ironic god of war. It has seen the rise and fall of kings and the birth of new worlds, yet it stays exactly as it was 7 centuries ago. We continue to build our civilizations and fight our wars, often forgetting that the things we die for are often as empty as a stolen wooden bucket from an ancient well.